Welcome everybody, so I am back and bringing you guys a brand new movie review. This is going to be for Man of Steel. Man of Steel is directed by Zack Snyder. It stars Henry Cavill as Kal-El. It also stars Russell Crowe as Jor-El. And it also has Michael Shannon as General Zod. This movie also stars Kevin Costner, who's playing Superman or Clark Kent's father figure type character in this movie. So basically this movie is pretty great on many levels, and I know a lot of people hate this movie mostly because of, destruction sequence that you see in Metropolis later on in this film, but I actually happen to like this movie a lot, and I'm going to be giving you a few reasons why after that I give you kind of my rundown of what this story is. So basically this movie takes place on Krypton. You see at the beginning of this movie, Jor-El, he is pretty much launching Kal-El into space. He fears that the apocalypse is coming, and there's actually an apocalyptic scenario happening on the planet Krypton, and his mother kind of agreed that they should be launching Kal-El into space. Meanwhile, you've got General Zod, who doesn't feel as though Kal-El should be dropped into an escape pod and launched into the atmosphere of the planet. He pretty much views this as an act of treason within the Krypton military, but Russell Crowe's character is adamant that he's going to do it anyway. Launches Kal-El into space as a young boy. Kal-El's ship lands on Earth, where they think that they are going to be able to have the child be raised by a group of farmers. The farmers pretty much take the son underneath their wing, and that is when you get to see Superman kind of struggle as a kid. He's bullied, he's picked on, which is something that I myself can personally relate to. So I can kind of relate to this version of Superman's character. This version of Superman's character, he is pretty much an outcast. He's pretty much, singled out by his peers as being sort of this weird kid that doesn't really belong. And even Superman, or the Clark Kent himself at a young age, pretty much views this to be the case. Him going to his father at one point in time in this movie, telling him that, he doesn't view that he is part of this planet, and that he doesn't know why he is pretty much picked on by everybody. And his father figure type character in this movie, played by Kevin Costner, is always kind of given him sort of moral questions and answers and stuff like that to what he's going through, which I really do like Kevin Costner as an actor. I think that Kevin Costner is a really underrated actor, and he does a lot of really big name movies, or has done a lot of big name movies in the past. I think that if you haven't seen the Kevin Costner lineup of films that he's done previously to this, you're gonna really underappreciate his character within this movie. There's a point in time in this movie where Kal-El is coming from school, and a group of kids attack him and push him up against the fence. He almost lashes out in anger and tries to punch him, and he holds back and he just lets them all go. When Kevin Costner's character comes in and pretty much consoles the young Kal-El, or Clark Kent, pretty much telling him that, yeah, you probably could have fought back, but then you would have revealed who you truly are underneath, and that you aren't really from this world, that you're from something different, and that you're meant for something better in the future, and that is why right now is not really the right time to kind of reveal who you are. There's several instances where he almost does that, especially one where he kind of locks himself within a closet, and you kind of see the x-ray vision that Kal-El has, or Clark Kent has, at a young age. This movie stars not only Kevin Costner and Russell Crowe, but it stars Henry Cavill and Michael Shannon, like I said before, and they all do really exceptional roles in this film. I think that each and every one of them gives pretty much their A game, if I haven't mentioned that before, and I really dig sort of seeing what Superman has to go through, even as sort of being a superhuman on this planet. I know that it's something that is explored a little bit in the comic books, but being myself, I haven't read too much Superman comics as a kid. In his adult years, you kind of see him go through sort of working as a fisherman. You see the sort of Deadliest Catch scene where all these shots kind of look like they came from the TV show The Deadliest Catch, which is something that I used to watch a lot, and I thought that was great because you kind of see even the Greenhorns don't really like Superman. They don't really like Clark Kent because they think he's a weakling, that he doesn't contribute to the team and everything. And so you see this, and then he leads himself to working in a dive bar, and some guys kind of attacking his girl and kind of being kind of a prick, and Superman intervenes, and you later find out that it's a trucker. And later on in this movie, after he's like, what, I'm finished, I'm not going to do this anymore, you see Superman, or Clark Kent, he pretty much takes the semi-truck and slams it up against telephone poles, which I think is a really funny sequence because the guy's not expecting Superman to kind of get his revenge on him, but he eventually does. You also see Superman kind of doing what he does best in the comics and everything, and that is saving people. There's an oil rig that pretty much explodes, and Clark Kent is pretty much saving the people that are on that oil rig. They all manage to get off to safety, and then you see the oil rig pretty much exploding, and Clark Kent is trying to, using his muscles and sort of his strength, try and keep the oil rig from crashing into the ocean, which eventually it does anyway. This kind of leads him to be secluded more and doesn't really want to reveal himself anymore because he's like, I tried to save these people and they don't really appreciate the things that I've done. Meanwhile, got another plot line where you have Amy Adams, Amy Adams is a really exceptional actress. I really like everything that Amy Adams has done, especially in this movie. I think this movie, her Lois Lane, is actually pretty decent. In the other versions that she's in, not so much. She's running for the Daily Planet. She's working alongside Lawrence Fishburne, who plays sort of the boss. But Lawrence Fishburne is a badass, and if you haven't seen The Matrix or his performance as Morpheus, you should definitely check that out as well. He pretty much sends her on an assignment, and she goes to the Antarctic ice sheet where she finds a crashed alien vehicle. This crashed alien vehicle happens to be the one that Superman came in on, and Russell Crowe's character, before the apocalyptic scenario that happened on Krypton, pretty much sewed his memory into the fabric of the alien vessel, so pretty much he can actually communicate with with Amy Adams as well as Superman, which is a little bit strange because you think maybe he's actually still alive, but he's actually pretty much dead, and this is just a memory of who he was, inside of this ship that he's locked himself into. And throughout most of this movie, he's helping Amy Adams especially escape, even when General Zod and his military show up later on in the film, which you kind of see this awesome battle sequence happening on a farm, which leads to sort of a town that he kind of slams himself against, sort of train tracks, and he goes through, buildings and stuff like that, which a lot of people attribute the destruction to be kind of careless and not something that Superman would do. But I think if this is a realistic scenario, such as what Zack Snyder has proposed here, this is exactly pretty much how it would happen. You would see sort of violence and destruction on sort of an astronomical level. And, Superman can't be everywhere. Like, even though the comics, he's always saving people and stuff, especially from, buildings that are being destroyed and everything, this version of Superman can't be there all at once like the comic book version can. This is kind of a realistic portrayal of him, which he does save people, especially in the Metropolis destruction sequence, just not as much as everybody would have wanted. So Amy Adams kind of investigates the case a little bit more, finds out that it's Clark Kent who's actually the person that is saving people and is behind all this, and that he's actually Superman. Superman actually gets the suit from his father, Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe kind of hands him the suit and tells him that, he's more powerful than these humans, and that one day he's going to have to make a choice in either to save these people or destroy them, and that this is pretty much up to him to decide. Meanwhile, you've got General Zod, who's pretty much his only mission is to kind of destroy everything that Clark Kent loves, which is Lois Lane and Martha Kent, who is pretty much his surrogate mother. And we get this awesome and heartbreaking sequence where young Clark Kent and Martha Kent and Kevin Costner's character, who plays the father figure in this movie, they're underneath an overpass. There's a tornado. He has to save the family dog. He goes to save the family dog, gets the dog to safety, and then Clark Kent's father dies. And you see that, Clark Kent really wants to help save him, that he wants to do something about this, but he can't, just because he can't reveal himself at the time, which he eventually does when he lifts a giant school bus out when it kind of crashes into a ravine, and there's a bunch of kids inside, and he's kind of trapped alongside with them. And still get some heartbreak scenes like that within this movie, where you see that Clark Kent wants to save people, but he knows that he can't, otherwise he's going to reveal who he is. And that tornado sequence, like, a lot of people are like, why didn't Superman just save his father? But there's a really good instance where you kind of see Kevin Costner's character, he puts out his hand and he's like, yeah, don't save me, otherwise you're going to pretty much reveal who you are. And I think that scene kind of haunts him. He really does love his father and his mother a lot, and you see that a lot through this movie, that his family really does matter to him, especially when it's threatened by General Zod. General Zod comes to Earth, and that's when you see that sequence where it kind of becomes a horror movie. Clark Kent goes inside of the farmhouse and he sees that the TV is kind of flickering on and off, and then you see the message that General Zod pretty much gives to the public, where he's like, give me Superman, otherwise I'm going to pretty much destroy and level this city to the ground. You see the alien ship kind of hovering over the farm, kind of nearby where Kal-El or Clark Kent is. Clark Kent kind of confronts them and is taken inside the ship. There's a fight sequence that happens in the ship with Amy Adams and stuff, and they all kind of break free with the help of Russell Crowe's character. And this leads to the fight sequence that I mentioned with the military and everything, when the military shows up, and you see Superman fighting with the alien creatures that have these gigantic metal suits, and they're all pretty much invincible. And you see the A-10 Warthog sequence where they're kind of gunning down Clark Kent and these alien creatures. They don't really know who to attack, because they all kind of look like they're evil. And then he's kind of like, yeah, just shoot the one that doesn't have a red and blue cape on him. And that was a pretty cool sequence. And then you see him slam through like an IHOP and everything, and that's where you get the awesome kind of train sequence in this movie. This leads to the fight sequence between General Zod and Metropolis, where you kind of get that awesome destruction sequence where a lot of people are complaining at the end of this movie that Superman is just as guilty as General Zod is for destroying the entire city, but it's not like he didn't try to stop him beforehand. General Zod even stated himself that it's either him dying or General Zod dying, and that's pretty much, you get that fight sequence that's pretty much an all-out brawl. General Zod even offering at one point in time to sort of have Superman kind of join forces with him, because General Zod is trying to terraform the planet to bring it kind of like Krypton, and that he is pretty much a political refugee, and that he wants Superman to kind of join forces with him because that's his people and everything. And Superman kind of denies General Zod's offer, because he knows that General Zod is just out there to kind of destroy humanity and sort of bring Krypton back from the dead, and he's willing to do it at pretty much any cost, even the cost of destroying his own family. So then you get that sequence at the end of the film where General Zod is struggling. There's a family inside of this museum, and General Zod is kind of like laser targeting this family slowly. You see it kind of like scratch across the wall and kind of almost towards them, and Superman or Clark Kent is kind of like, stop, like, this isn't right, that you shouldn't be doing this. And General Zod is pretty much like, never. And then you see Superman, he kind of like snaps General Zod's neck, and that's kind of the infamous scene that everybody kind of gripes about. But being that I kind of understand where this character is coming from and everything, I think that this is pretty much the right decision that Superman was kind of forced to make. He doesn't want to kill General Zod. He wants General Zod to stop. He says so many times throughout this movie, and General Zod does not listen to him, and then that's why he's pretty much forced to kill him. Like, if he could save General Zod, he probably would have. And Michael Shannon does a really good job portraying this character. This character is a ruthless sort of badass, and his suit kind of resembles that of the Predator in a way, just like the armor and everything. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but just the way that it's designed and everything, it just kind of looks like that. I really do like the design design of the new Superman suit. I think it's really cool, especially with the S that's on it. And at one point in the time in the movie, they're interrogating Superman. I think it's towards the end of the film. And you got Amy Adams and Henry Cavill there, or Henry Cavill, whatever you call him. And she's like, what does the S stand for? And then he's like, my planet means hope and everything, which, she's like, I think it means Superman or something like that. And then you kind of get that awesome sequence where Superman at the end of the film kind of takes out a drone right in front of one of the military officers in the movie. And you see another military officer, and she's kind of got the hots for Superman, which I think it was a pretty funny sequence. And, this movie set up a lot of things to come Justice League. I know that a lot of people don't like the Justice League or Batman v Superman movies, but I think this movie is really great and probably the best in the DC Cinematic Universe, aside from, the Batman, the Christopher Nolan trilogy. This movie really is sort of in style of that Dark Knight and sort of the Dark Knight Rises kind of feel to it. The actors are great and everybody does a great job. There's a lot of really cool one-liners within this film, and there's stuff that you can kind of pretty much quote for a long time to come. There's a lot of memes made out of this movie, so I think this movie already has sort of that coolness factor with it being Zack Snyder and having sort of the bombastic action sequences expect from him even after 300. The story is pretty much really, really good, and I think that it kind of relies a lot of the hero's journey where you've kind of got the hero that's kind of forced to act even though he doesn't want to. He kind of holds himself back and everything until the last moment when you see General Zod come and, his military, and it pretty much threatens his life and everything that he holds dear. Music is really great by Hans Zimmer. I think Hans Zimmer does a really fantastic job. And yeah, I think for its time, this was a really heartfelt, good take on Superman. I think that a lot of people who had gripes on it really had gripes just because they didn't like the Metropolis sequence, and that sequence where you see that scene where even in the middle of destruction, Amy Adams just happens to be there, or Lois Lane, and Superman and Lois Lane pretty much have that kiss moment. And it's like, you're in the middle of a battle sequence, that happens. I could kind of see their point a little bit, but still, this is a really good movie, and I think it definitely deserves sort of an A rating. It's definitely not an A+. There's still a couple things that I do really have gripes on, such as the pacing and everything. I'm stumbling on my words and stuff, but those are my thoughts and opinions. I hope you guys kind of enjoyed my sort of breakdown of Man of Steel. There's really cool, awesome action sequences, such as the oil rig scene. Fight sequence takes place through that sort of farm town. And then you've got the final battle between Metropolis, which, he does save people in Metropolis, just not as much as people were hoping for, I think. So I think this movie definitely deserves that A caliber rating. I think this is a really underrated sort of DCEU movie, but, those are my thoughts and opinions. Hopefully you like this review, and as always, guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.